Kumar here. When it comes to the response essay, we are still doing the full writing process. So what does that mean? The first step is the invention process, just like the last essay. So remember what we talked about last time: brainstorming, clustering, free writing. And so you may be thinking to yourself, okay, I understand how I might do those things for an argument that I'm coming up with, but how do I do it for a response? Well, it's pretty similar. You're responding, I'm asking you to respond to an argument, just like the argument you made. Someone made an argument to you. What you need to do is think about this. What are some of the points that argument brought up? This author, or these two essays that I asked you to read, those authors bring up multiple points. So if you're brainstorming, right, you're going to write a bunch of the points that author brought up. If you're clustering, you're going to bring up a bunch of points that the author brought up, and you're going to maybe write some details. How did the author support that point? How did the author explain that point? What are some examples that the author used? If you're free writing, you're going to just basically write your response. How would you respond to these points? But in this case, I really highly recommend that you try clustering or brainstorming. You can do free writing, and that's fine. But what I really, most people find really helpful in this case is to go over the reading, go over this essay that you're going to respond to. Go over it very carefully. At this point, hopefully, you've really gotten into annotation. Because what you're going to do is try to come up with what are all the points that the author brought up. So maybe the author brought up, maybe the author was making a point that people shouldn't smoke, okay? So the author, you have to think about what is the actual thesis statement. So try to think of, what is the thesis statement? If you don't know the thesis statement, what don't you know? You don't know what the argument is. If you don't know what the argument is, how can you respond? So it's really important to try to understand what is it that this author is trying to argue. It could be that the thesis statement is really easy to figure out. It could be that the thesis statement isn't really stated very clearly and that you have to do some thinking on your own. Whatever the case, you have to know what the author is trying to argue, because that is going to be important for responding. You'll also need to know supporting details. If you know the supporting details, if you know the points that the author made to get to this, to make this author's audience believe the thesis statement, now you have some ammunition. Now you have some things that you can respond to. You might say the author was trying to prove this point, and when she was trying to prove this point, she made this point to support her thesis. When she did this, it was a good move, because most audiences are going to respond to information like that. Maybe you might say that the author provided enormous amount of statistics that proved this supporting detail. Maybe you might say that the author should have provided more statistics, more facts. It depends on what you're reading. But what your main goal in the brainstorming, clustering, free writing, in the invention stage, your main goal is to pick apart the essay that I asked you to read. So you get to choose one of the two. Pick that apart. What's the main argument? What are supporting details that the author uses to make that argument? What do I think about these things? Those are the things I want you to brainstorm, cluster, and free write about. So what is the main argument? What are some points that the author brings up to support that argument? And what do I think about those things? So you should have an enormous amount. Your pre-writing for this, your invention stage, your brainstorming, free writing, clustering, should be enormous. This should be you should have a lot more here than you had for your argumentative essay, okay? As we continue, this portion of the writing process is going to increase. You're going to do more and more of this. So Now you know, get started on it.